This is your news update on Radio BVM. Veteran motorman hurt. Mr. Adam Taylor, the extension car evening motorman, generally known as Adam, met with a painful accident Friday evening about 10 p.m. Operating one of the new shuttle cars with the automatic rear door, he was attempting to open the door from the outside by the special lever underneath when his hand caught in the metalwork, with the result that he lost the top of one finger. Emergency aid was performed at a local drugstore, and Dr. K.L. Craig was called. Mr. Taylor will be back on the old route in a few days. And contagious disease reports are Armstrong Avenue, mumps, 3 students. Inman Avenue, measles, 4 students. Kingsway West, more cases of measles, 9 students. And mumps, 8. The board accepted an invitation to the Burnaby South High School annual banquet on May 10th as well. That was your Burnaby Village Museum radio news update.
All right, this is Brendan at Radio BVM. We're going to conduct a live interview at Elworth, which is number 13 on the list, built in 1922. And so we'll just knock on the door and see if anyone's home. Good day.
Good afternoon. How can I help you?
Oh, we'd like to interview you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about Elworth?
Sure. My name is Diana. I have been working here for 15 years, other than 4 years that I was out of country. And I do many roles here. One is the museum interpreter.
Oh, great. And what do museum interpreters do?
Basically, you tell you a bit about the story of whatever building that you are. You interpret the information that you have to the different visitors and what they are actually interested in.
Fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about this great building. It's called Elworth, I believe.
That's right. Elworth is very important because Elworth was always here. Elworth was built in 1922. They actually built their garage first, and they lived in there for a couple of summers and supervised while the house was being built. Now, at this time, this area here at Burnaby Village was mostly forest, and there was just a couple of farms, strawberry farms, and so this was really underdeveloped. And the walkway that were right here actually went right down to the Douglas Road. The property here at Burnaby Village extended right to the schoolhouse and down, and it was all of their property.
Oh, well, that's quite a bit of extensive land. Now, why was this area picked?
Basically, because there was certain Deer Lake, there was houses that were along Deer Lake, and one person actually owned most of the lots, and he chose the people that he would like to actually live along the lake.
So it kind of was an exclusive club.
It was an exclusive club, absolutely. Now, Mr. Bateman, who owned this, he works still. He worked at the Canadian Pacific Railway, and he would take that interurban line into work for the last 6 years before he retired.
Oh, wow. And so will you let us come in?
Absolutely, come on in. Well, as visitors, the first thing I would have done is actually open the French doors and allowed you to come in and sit into the parlor room. The parlor room or sitting room was an area for guests. It wasn't for children, and used only for when you had guests.
And I see lots of different kind of music and sound playing devices. What kind of devices do you have in there that emit sound?
Well, they had piano, of course, and then they had the gramophone that they used. And this one was a little bit different because it actually didn't use a record. It used cylinder that played, much like a player piano, I always say, but much smaller.
Oh, great. And did they also have a radio in there as well?
Yes, they did, of course. They would have had the radio going. Mrs. Bateman would have done all her chores to that radio.
Oh, great. And they could listen to this interview if they wanted to.
Excellent. I think so.
And what's across the hallway?
Across the hallway, we have the dining room set for afternoon supper, which apparently Mr. Bateman used to take the tram back to work just for that little bit of supper, and then back to work he went again.
He'd have 2 dinners.
Yes. Well, the main course was actually at lunch. which they called dinner. And then supper was a lighter meal.
Oh, okay. So they kind of eat differently than we do now.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Further back is the den, and that's where they actually spent most of their nights, listening to the radio, of course, writing their letters, reading, doing needlework.
Oh, great. And where would the children go?
At this time, Mr. and Mrs. Bateman only had 2 adult children. One of them married in 1924, Warren, which we were very lucky to have happen because a lot of the information of how we restored this house comes from those pictures, those wonderful wedding pictures. And May, she actually also worked with her father, and she was a modern 20s girl.
Oh, great. And so after you go through this area,
Hallway?
yeah, this hallway here, you have a bedroom, I believe.
Yes. We have the master bedroom here on the ground floor, and I think in anticipation when they built the house, they thought that they were an elderly couple, and there was the sense of going up and down the stairs. The 2 adult children actually had the rooms upstairs, and they were very fortunate to have an indoor bathroom, which was very, very luxurious at the time.
Now, this bathroom is slightly different from the rest of the house. What era is it described as?
Well, a lot of the fixtures that we see are from the 30s, 35, when the second owner actually, to build the house, or to buy the house, actually changed over a little bit. So we have some kind of octagon-shaped taps and vanity, and those came from the second owner, actually.
So it actually looks quite modern compared to the rest of the house.
It does, in a sense, yes.
Yeah. And it demonstrates different time periods here at the museum.
Yes, I guess it does.
And then I see there's a doorway for upstairs. What is upstairs?
Well, upstairs is actually the Canadian Costume Society. There's several bedrooms up there. The Canadian Costume Society has the space, and they store all of their different costumes from the different eras. So again, there, I guess there's different senses of time through the 20s and continued on that are stored up there in the bedrooms upstairs.
Oh, fantastic. And what do we have at the end here?
At the end, we have our kitchen, of course. Let's walk over there so we get a better sense. So the one thing in the house that actually was not very modern was the coal and wood burning stove. Mrs. Bateman, again, they were an elderly couple, and she'd been using a coal and wood burning stove for 50 years at least. So she didn't want those newfangled electric stoves. She wanted her more reliable coal and wood burning stove.
Were there electric stoves quite accessible at this time?
If you did have electricity, you more than welcome could buy, actually, at the general store here, you could buy an electric stove.
Oh, great. And so she thought they just were unreliable for some reason.
That's right. And I think when you're used to, for 50 years, doing one kind of thing, it's quite a different thing to use an electric stove.
Were there quite a few power outages at the time?
Yes, and that's why we also had the lantern there, because the electricity isn't as reliable as it is now. So they always had a source of light and heat that was not electric.
And I see over here in the corner that we have this big wooden box. What is that?
That is the ice box. Now, the ice box, of course, would have never been put by a nice hot stove. That was either kept in the basement or in the porch. But the iceman would come in and weigh 50-pound blocks of ice and replace my ice whenever I needed it.
Well, it's good it's upstairs today because now we get all to see it and all the visitors get to ask questions about it.
That's correct. And on the ice box, we actually have some new modern electric appliances. The electric toaster, percolator, and iron.
Now, what's a percolator?
Coffee percolator. We still use them today.
Oh, look at that. And so this toaster doesn't seem to have anything but wires showing.
Yes, it's a very unsafe toaster in our sense right now. And it just really has a couple of wire hangs. A lot of people equate it to when they go camping. And this one did not pop up, as I say to the children. You would actually have to monitor and change the bread as necessary.
Oh, well, kind of a self-serve toaster. And over there, you have a bunch of cupboards open. What's in those cupboards over there?
Well, in the 20s, they had a saying, everything in its place and a place for everything. Well, this Hoosier, which is a baking unit, was a very prime example of it. You were able to bake. You had your flour sifter, your sugar bowl, your salt, your spices, even a rolling pin, and a spot to put your recipe book at eye level, all contained in one cupboard. When you were done, the best part is you just had to close everything up neat and clean.
Oh, well, that's great. And did people tend to make their own food?
Of course, there was processed food wasn't that readily available as it is now. So everything was actually homemade, and baking was done quite often. And of course, Fridays being a big baking day, so I better get on it.
Yeah. And what kind of things are jarred up there?
There's a lot of canning that they had. They were, Mr. and Mrs. Bayman actually were avid gardeners. They had gorgeous gardens in before the house even went up. And they would also have a very large vegetable garden. So those would be some of the remnants, like beets and tomatoes, corn, lots of different things to sustain themselves through the winter.
Why wouldn't they just buy vegetables at the regular corner store?
Well, we don't have greenhouses like we do now that we can actually export from California. We ate what was in season.
Oh, so if they didn't can their food, they wouldn't have any vegetables.
Yes, it would be nice to have some vegetables during those winter seasons.
Oh, great. And is there any other things you want to show us in the kitchen, or is that about it?
Well, the one other thing is how much work it was actually to just store and prepare food, as well as things like butter churning, which took 45 minutes to an hour just to make 1 pound of butter. Or the ice cream maker, which took a good hour to make ice cream. But the one advantage is there's no freezer, so you got to eat everything you made.
And did they eat a lot of ice cream?
Just on those very special occasions. It was a lot of work to make ice cream, so you wanted to make sure it was special time.
Oh, great. And now you said one of the girls was a modern working day girl. What do you mean by that?
May never actually married. She actually stayed single, and she lived with Mr. and Mrs. Bateman for the whole time that they were here in Elworth.
Oh, okay. And so was it common for women in the 1920s to work?
Yes and no. Usually if they did work, it was before they got married, and that was just for a few years. Then after that, they didn't work. And most women did get married.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and showing us Elworth. Was there anything else you wanted to add or show us before we leave?
I don't think so. Thanks for coming to visit.
Okay. Well, that was Diana, a museum interpreter here on May 24th. And this is Brendan signing off on Radio BVM.
This is Storytime on Radio BVM, brought to you by Vancouver Heights Pharmacy and Dispensary. Note our everyday prices, Kodak's Films Developing, and on special this week, Colgate's Listerine, 25 cents. Today's feature is The Top and Ball by Hans Christian Andersen. A whipping top and a little ball lay together in a box, among other toys, and the top said to the ball, "Shall we be married, as we live in the same box?" But the ball, which wore a dress of Morocco leather, and thought as much of herself as any other young lady, would not even condescend to reply. The next day came the little boy to whom the playthings belonged, and he painted the top red and yellow, and drove a brass-headed nail into the middle, so that while the top was spinning round, it looked quite splendid. "Look at me," said the top to the ball. "What do you say now? Shall we be engaged to each other? We should suit so well. You spring, and I dance. No one could be happier than we could be." "Indeed, do you think so? Perhaps you do not know that my father and mother were Morocco slippers, and that I have a Spanish cork in my body." "Yes, but I am made of mahogany," said the top. "The major himself turned me. He has a turning lathe of his own, and it is a great amusement to him." "Can I believe it?" said the ball. "May I never be whipped again," said the top, "if I am not telling you the truth." "You certainly know how to speak of yourself very well," said the ball, "but I cannot accept your proposal. I am almost engaged to a swallow. Every time I fly up in the air, he puts his head out of the nest and says, 'Will you?' And I've said yes to myself silently, and that is as good as being half engaged. But I will promise never to forget you." "Much good that will be to me," said the top, and they spoke to each other no more. Next day the ball was taken out by the boy. The top saw it flying higher and higher like a bird, till it would go quite out of sight. Each time it came back, as it touched the earth, it gave a higher leap than before, either because it longed to fly upwards, or from having a Spanish cork in its body. But the 9th time it rose in the air, it remained away and did not return. The boy searched everywhere for it, but he searched in vain, for it could not be found. It was gone. "I know very well where she is," sighed the top. "She is in the swallow's nest and has married the swallow." The more the top thought of this, the more he longed for the ball. His love increased the more just because he could not get her, and that she should have been won by another was the worst of all. The top still twirled about and hummed, but he continued to think of the ball, and the more he thought of her, the more beautiful she seemed to his fancy. Thus several years passed by, and his love became quite old. The top also was no longer young, but there came a day when he looked handsomer than ever, for he was gilded all over. He was now a golden top, and whirled and danced about till he hummed quite loud, and was something worth looking at. But one day he leaped too high, and then he also was gone. They searched everywhere, in the cellar, but he was nowhere to be found. Where could he be? He had jumped into the dustbin, where all sorts of rubbish were lying, cabbage stalks, dust, and rain droppings that had fallen down from the gutter under the roof. "Now I am in a nice place," said he. "My gilding will soon be washed off here. Oh dear, what a set of rabble I've got amongst." And then he glanced at a curious round thing like an old apple, which lay near a long leafless cabbage stalk. It was, however, not an apple, but an old ball, which had lain for years in the gutter and was soaked through with water. "Thank goodness, here comes one of my own class with whom I can talk," said the ball, examining the gilded top. "I am made of Morocco," she said. "I was sewn together by a young lady, and I have a Spanish cork in my body. But no one would think of it to look at me now. I was once engaged to a swallow, but I fell in here from the gutter under the roof, and I have lain here for more than 5 years, and have been thoroughly drenched. Believe me, it is a long time for a young maiden." The top said nothing, but he thought of his old love. The more she said, the more clear it became to him that this was the same ball. The servant then came to clean out the dustbin. "Ah," she exclaimed, "here is a gilt top." So the top was brought again to notice and honor, but nothing more was heard of the little ball. He spoke not a word about his old love, for that soon died away. When the beloved object has lain for 5 years in a gutter and has been drenched through, no one cares to know her again on meeting her in a dustbin.
Welcome back to Radio BVM. We're on the air, and we have a couple of guests today. Welcome to Burnaby Village Museum. Thanks for joining me on the air.
Thank you for having us.
So, what brings you to Burnaby Village Museum today?
We're rehearsing our play, Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, and we're gonna do the actual thing on June.
Yeah,
1st.
sometime in June, I believe. It's in like a week before our play.
So, next Saturday, you'll be doing a play on June 1st at Burnaby Village Museum?
Yeah.
Are you excited about it?
Slightly nervous, but
Yeah, it's exciting, but I still have to get my lines memorized because I'm playing a major role. So.
Oh, what role are you playing?
I'm doing Titania.
Titania.
And I'm just a fairy.
Well, every role is important. What's the saying? There's no small parts, only small actors. Yes, well, what is special about this play?
It's a student-run play, so it's just our English honors class, and we're doing a 1920s version, so it's going to be a little bit different than the classic, Shakespeare.
Yeah, so instead of having the traditional fairies in their like colorful costumes. We're actually doing a play centered around like 1920s flapper style outfits and accents.
Oh, great. And what kind of accents would they have in the 1920s?
Gangster, you know.
Yeah. There's slang, and Jesse's really the only one in our class that actually has his accent down.
Oh, and would they say things like, "You dolls have nice gams"?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're still using the same like script from the traditional one, except we're doing it with a 1920s twist to it.
Oh, great. And is it in one specific area at the museum, this play?
We're going to be moving around, and there's going to be a lot of people, so we have someone who's going to be leading everyone around the museum.
So how's that going to work? You're going to start in one area?
Yeah, we move from scene to scene, and we'll have like breaks and stuff in between the play, and yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's sort of a roaming production. We're gonna get our audience to move around like with chairs and everything, so they can actually be physically moving scene to scene.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That's quite unique, eh? Starting a play in one location in a area and then go throughout the whole site to finish the play.
Yeah.
And how will people know which scene you're on?
Well, we have a narrator, Karen, who's going to be sort of directing our group of parents, I guess. And she's basically playing as a newspaper boy. It's like, come on, read all about it. And she'll have like a newspaper, and then she'll lead people around the museum.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Well, good luck in your play next week.
Thank you.
And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
And this is Brendan at Radio BVM.